Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we are going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors' victory against the Miami Heat 119-116. But before we do that, I want to talk about where the team stands right now, the crossroads that the team is on, and how they're going to have to make a decision, what they want to do this season in the next couple of weeks and perhaps months. So why don't we get right into that? As you well know, if you've been watching this channel, I have been trying to beat into your head, homestand, 7-game homestand. The 7-game homestand began yesterday with a victory over the Miami Heat, in which they looked pretty much in control from the beginning of the game to the end, with a couple of moments where the Heat were able to exploit the Toronto Raptors' mistakes, but I think that they outplayed them. It was a pretty decisive victory, and the score made it look a little bit closer thanks to some fortuitous three-point shooting by the Heat toward the end of the game. But the Raptors looked like they were the better team. And I've been saying for a while now that the Raptors are not your average bad team. Before this game, they had only won 25% of their games. That's a pretty terrible mark any way you slice it. But the majority of the games that they've lost, 11 of them have come on the road, and they're 4-4 at home. The Toronto Raptors are really at a crossroads this season. They have a record that indicates that you would want to tank, but they have a core of players that are going to probably win them quite a few games this season. And the players, of course, I'm referring to are RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl. Those three players have been the Toronto Raptors' best players this season, without a question, when they're healthy, and especially when they're playing at home in RJ Barrett's case, although the final two games of the 4-game road trip, he was actually quite good. But those three players together give the Raptors a core that they can rely on, that will give them good production and defense pretty much every night, and most bad teams do not have players like that. I'm not saying that the Raptors, those three, are going to go toe-to-toe with the best top threes in the league. I think they could make it competitive, but they're certainly not the best. However, most bad teams don't really have that stable base that allows them to win games against good competition. What I am foreseeing is that this homestand is going to give the Raptors a lift. I think that they will probably win the majority of the games at home. They might go 4-3. And that's simply not going to cut it when it comes to tanking. I think that if the Toronto Raptors want to be one of the 10 worst teams in the league, they're going to have to make some changes. And this is very difficult. I'm conflicted here because, of course, I watch all of the games and I like it when the Toronto Raptors play well, and I cheer for the team to win every time I sit down on the couch to watch them. However, I understand the big picture. The big picture says that if you fall behind, if you're 5-15 at the 1 quarter mark, it's probably in your best interests to look at the lottery. Don't squander a poor record. If the Raptors were 500 and they had been playing well the majority of the season, and their upcoming schedule was going to be as easy as the Toronto Raptors is towards the end of the season, I would say, make a push, go for it. However, when you're 5-16, the idea that you should push and try and equalize, get back up to 500 and perhaps compete in the East, that seems like perhaps you are going in the incorrect direction. However, I think that that is the direction the Toronto Raptors are going to go in if the front office allows it to. And they've put enough talent on the roster, especially with players coming back when Emmanuel quickly comes back and perhaps the other veterans, that they are going to have far too much skill to bottom out. And so you have to start thinking about which direction you want to go. And as excited as I am to watch the Toronto Raptors win games, I'm wondering whether it would be prudent for the Toronto Raptors to make some changes with their team. First of all, Jakob Poeltl, of course, I've spoken a couple of times about how he will be viewed by other teams who need a big man. I'm sure that Masai and Bobby are getting many calls for him, offering a good return. He is a very valuable player on both ends of the court, and he is a player that understands how to play the game. He is having the best season of his career. He is one of the top 15 centers in the league. He has true center size. He plays the right way, and his production is scalable. He can take 15 shots like he was when Scotty Barnes was out, or he He can take 8 to 10 shots if you need him to and maintain a level of production. If you wanted to make the Toronto Raptors bottom 10 and you wanted to remove one piece from the puzzle that would make them one of the worst teams in the league, he would be a player that you would want to trade. Davion Mitchell, he got the player of the game chain yesterday because of his defense. He's another guy that are probably going to be getting calls about because of his defensive ability, and he has looked good in a Raptors uniform. And then there are the other veterans, Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk, who still have not returned. I thought that they would be making a return prior to this, but they're still on the bench. Once they make a return, they'll probably contribute as well. So one of the things that you should think about when you are evaluating whether you want to make a trade or not is the trajectory of the team. So for example, a lot was made about when the Toronto Raptors traded for Jakob Poeltl. Trades are not made in a vacuum. Jakob Poeltl, as we have watched this season, is worth a first-round pick. What the Raptors gave up for him was fair value. He has certainly been worth a first-round pick. It's difficult to argue otherwise. The statistics that he's putting up, the defense that he brings to the table, the trade from just completely in a vacuum was worth it. He is a good player. However, when it comes to the trajectory of the team when they traded for Jakob Poeltl, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. The Toronto Raptors should have seen the way that the team, the trajectory of the team, where it was going. They had lost a ton of games. They needed to either make the trade sooner so that they could have maintained some level of competitive play, brought him in, changed the culture a little sooner so that they were fresher going into the playoffs, or they should have gone in the opposite direction and traded Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet when they could have gotten more for them. There's a similar thing to be said right now as well. If you were to hop, skip, and jump over to Tankathon, the Toronto Raptors are the 5th worst team in the league, and they have a 10% chance of drafting number 1 overall, a 42% chance of drafting in the top 4. And as good as Jakob Poeltl is, and as strong as Jakob Poeltl has played for the Toronto Raptors, you have to evaluate that if the Toronto Raptors can move into the top 4 of this year's draft and select one of the best players in this draft class, while at the same time getting the value that Jakob Poeltl probably has, which is a first-round pick in another draft class. That seems like something that the Toronto Raptors need to consider. And I understand his role in developing players and the strong synergy he has with the other top players on the team, but perhaps it's time to pull the trigger and move Jakob Poeltl along with some other veterans to fully commit to rebuilding. On the other hand, let's say that you didn't want to tank. As I mentioned at the beginning of the season in my season overview, the schedule is extremely unbalanced. The beginning of the schedule is harsh, very tough, and as we've seen, the Toronto Raptors did not get much of a respite throughout those first 20 games of the season. They were on the road for a long stretch against some of the best teams in the West. They had very, very difficult teams at home. It was a pretty brutal schedule. The schedule toward the end of the season, why don't we do a little bit of a refresher? The final 20 games of the season are ludicrously easy for the Toronto Raptors. It is as if they took the beginning of the season and flipped it on its head and gave the Toronto Raptors one of the easiest cakewalk schedules to finish out the year. Here, let's start. Final 20 games. So the Utah Jazz, 3rd worst record in the league. Washington Wizards, worst record in the league. Washington Wizards again, worst record in the league. Philadelphia 76ers, 4th worst record in the league. Then the Utah Jazz again, 3rd worst record in the league. Then the Portland Trail Blazers, 7th worst record in the league. Then the Phoenix Suns, good team. Golden State Warriors, decent team. San Antonio Spurs, decent team. Washington Wizards, worst team in the league. Brooklyn Nets, 10th worst team in the league. Charlotte Hornets, 6th worst team in the league. Philadelphia 76ers, again, 4th worst team in the league. Chicago Bulls, 7th worst team in the league. Portland Trail Blazers, 7th worst team in the league. Detroit Pistons, 9th worst team in the league. Brooklyn Nets, 10th worst team in the league. Charlotte Hornets, again, 6th worst team in the league. Dallas Mavericks, pretty good team. San Antonio Spurs, pretty good team. That is crazy. That is, if you could come up with the schedule that was the easiest schedule you could think of, that would be pretty close to it. That is the final 20 games that the Toronto Raptors play this season. So do you think entering the final couple of months of the season, if you have a full roster, you're going to be winning the majority of those games? You are going to be putting yourself pretty much out of the lottery hunt, and you'd probably be making a push for the play-in tournament if that is your final stretch of games and you've been treading water since then. If you want to go in the direction of winning, then they will have the opportunity to do that, and I think that they could make a push for the play-in tournament. But if you want to tank, you're going to have to do something about it. You can't just sit back and hope that the team is going to lose games. It's not going to happen. Judging by how the team has played, just watching the games, night in, night out, they're in almost every game, you're not going to be in the tank race anymore. So it really comes down to what you want from the season. If you are a person who wants to push for the play-in tournament, you're going to hope that they don't make any trades. But if you want to tank, and if you want to take advantage of the 6-15 record that the Raptors have right now, you're hoping that the front office listens and maybe trades some of the veterans on the roster to make it more likely that they bottom out. Sometimes it's not the best to play the middle road, as we saw when the Raptors made the initial trade for Jakob Poeltl, because the team was waving the white flag and they made a move to try and get them back into it. Is that really where we want to be again, watching this team finish in the play-in, the 10, 9, 8, 7 range, when there are a lot of really strong players at the top of this draft class? That's the question you got to ask yourself. So we'll see. In terms of this game, let's go to the player evaluations. We will start with RJ Barrett, who had a fantastic game. He is, guys, looking like a superstar at home. Literally looking like a superstar at home. And of course, he had a really good final 2 games of the road trip where he scored very well, but 37 points at home, the first game of the homestand. He is now averaging 30 points at home on 65% true shooting percentage with 7 rebounds and 6 assists. That is elite production. This guy is legit at home in the 7 home games that they've played. He was phenomenal last night, especially just the scoring. He could not be stopped. One of the great things about RJ Barrett is his strength going to the basket. In my deep dive on RJ Barrett, which I made before the season, you should check it out, I mentioned how RJ is really good at using his physicality when he gets around the rim. RJ Barrett is not a waif. He's not a little shrimpy guy. He is an extremely solid brick-like player for a guard wing. And that was evident last night. Jimmy Butler is a strong player. He's big. He plays a rugged brand of basketball. But RJ Barrett was getting him in the post, bonking into him with his body, carving out space, and scoring around Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, who's a pretty good rim protector. He shot 15 of 20 from the field, so just unreal efficiency. He was 3 of 4 from 3. He hit all of his free throws, which has been his Achilles heel this season. 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 turnovers, whatever, and a block. The guy is one of the very best drivers in the league. So he uses screens to get into the paint. He used the Jakob Poeltl screen, but also he is getting much better at isolation plays as well. He would get his man on his hip, get into the paint, and then draw contact, because as you know, as I mentioned, he's very rugged. He does not shy away from contact. He goes into you. That is a very good thing when it comes to drawing fouls. He was drawing fouls. He got a ton of and ones. That just shows the strength. Not only are you getting the foul, but you're making the shot as well. He was a force, just jamming it down Miami's throat every single play. Every time he got the ball in his hands, he was in the paint making a play. Elite game from RJ Barrett, extremely encouraging. I think that he has been just a revelation for the Raptors since he's arrived here. Looking like a better and better trade every single day. Even if it was just RJ for OG Anunoby, I mean, that's starting to look worth it. If you can get a number 1 option that can be as efficient as he has been at home this season. I'm just super happy with what RJ Barrett has been able to deliver for the Raptors this season, and I don't see why it would stop here. I think that he's been building on his success after success. Those final 2 road games were a good sign for him, and then delivering this kind of performance at home, it looks like the guy is just emerging. So we'll have to keep tabs on this development if he can continue his meteoric rise in his second season with the Toronto Raptors. Super pumped up watching him play. Next up, we got to talk about Jakob Poeltl, and we'll start with him second. I think he was the second best player in the game, and the reason for that was the defense. So Jakob Poeltl, we'll just shout out his stat line right now, which was very good. 17 points on 12 shots. He was 5 of 8 from the free throw line, totally acceptable. 11 rebounds, 4 of them offensive, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, only 1 turnover. Great stat line. Take that every day of the week. But the defense, we got to talk about the defense. I know that I always say that you can't just look at the opposing center's stats when you're evaluating a center's defense, because they are playing help. They're the primary help defender. They're the guy that is guarding the basket against all players. So you can't just look at the other center, but we will look at the center because he decisively won the Bam Adebayo matchup both nights, even the game that they lost against the Miami Heat. Jakob Poeltl won that matchup. Last night, Bam Adebayo hit literally at the end of the game with a couple of seconds left when they had no chance of winning. He had a 3 to make his stat line look a little better, but he had 13 points on 13 shots. He did have 20 rebounds, which is impressive. 7 assists, 5 turnovers. I'm going to tell you right now, looking at that stat line, you'd be like, okay, he had a good game. He did not have a good game. Every time he had Jakob Poeltl in the post, Jakob Poeltl was in front of him with his hands up. Bam Adebayo had nothing going. He did not have a good night. And that ditto for the game that he had against Poeltl in Miami. He put up a triple-double. Was highly suspect. He got a really lame rebound at the end of the game to get it, but he did not have a good night there either. And then you look at Jimmy Butler, who had 17 points on 9 shots. You'd assume that that's a good night for him. Nobody had anything going to the basket. Jakob Poeltl did his best Marc Gasol impression, where he would just stand in the paint. He would put his body in the exact right spot to limit the penetration, force players to shoot over top of him, and then grab the rebound. Just every possession, get in the right spot, help at the right place, turn, box out, grab the rebound. Every single possession, just consistently being in the correct place. The Miami Heat were reliant on Tyler Hero hitting shots to score for them. They did not have an interior game, and Jakob Poeltl was pretty much the reason for that. I mean, they did get good defensive performances from Scotty Barnes, Ochai Agbaji, and Davion Mitchell, so you can't just give Poeltl. But like the guy on defense, the player who is always the most important player on defense, is always the center. So much hinges on the ability to make players worried about going in the paint and not being comfortable shooting in the paint and defensive rebounding. So much is hinging on that, being able to make teams one and done, and he did a fantastic job there. I thought he was the second best player in the game. Scotty Barnes, I'm going to put third here, but you could mix and match. You could say all of these guys had the best game. Scotty Barnes had close to a triple-double. He was great. He had a really clutch 3 when it looked like Miami was coming back. He was in control. He was playing great defense. 23 points on 17 shots. He was 2 of 5 from 3. Almost all of the shots were good shots. He was taking catch and shoot shots to space the floor. This guy knows how to play the game, okay? He knew that RJ was cooking this game. At the end of the game, RJ was trying to pass the ball to Scotty. He said, okay, your turn, Scotty. Gave him the ball. Scotty gave it right back to RJ. He said, basically, dude, you are cooking, go. And then RJ hit Scotty with a very nice kick out. Scotty Barnes shoots the 3, it goes in. This unselfishness, this playing for one another, Scotty Barnes is a great leader in that regard, and you can't ask for a better guy. If you have a franchise player that is willing to share on offense and get other guys involved, feed the hot hand, be unselfish, that is a winning player. And Scotty Barnes is a winning player. I was just really blown away by his maturity, and Scotty is a fun guy. He keeps it light. He does all that stuff, but the guy wants to win. And you can really tell that when he's playing to win. He's playing the right way. So just like really pleased with how he plays the game. 23 points, 17 shots, 10 rebounds, 9 assists, great passes. The guy He is one of the key ball handlers in the half court for the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors have him and RJ Barrett as the two lead, essentially guards on the team. They are the primary initiators. He does a fantastic job of reading the game, getting other players involved, and scoring when necessary. Just a very mature performance from him. He wasn't a superstar like he has been in other games where he carried the team from a scoring standpoint, but he definitely did enough there last night and had a great game on both sides of the court. And as I mentioned with Scotty Barnes as one of the bigs on the team, his defensive effort, his ability to grab defensive rebounds, 9 defensive rebounds, and just his strong interior play. He's one of the other elements of Toronto's rim defense package of him and Jakob Poeltl. That is a tough front line to score on. Those two guys standing in the paint it's going to make it hard for other teams to get to the basket and score. They just, him and Poeltl did a fantastic job. Next up, we'll talk about the rookie, Jacoby Walter, and he had 12 points on 10 shots. He was 2 of 4 from 3. He hit a couple of really nice threes. It just brings a smile to your face that he's making an impact at this level in his career, and you can tell why they brought this guy aboard. He is an athlete. He is a shooter. He's a guy who can play a role, but also seems to have that little extra something where when he does put the ball on the floor and handles it a little bit, your hair starts standing up a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, this guy has some creation potential as well. Of course, he's a rookie. He made some rookie mistakes. There was a kind of bad possession where he was the primary defender on Tyler Hero, but he thought they were going to switch for some reason, and he just literally backpedaled and walked completely away from Tyler Hero, who had been scorching hot up to that point in the game, and he shot an open 3 and made the shot, and I was just like, oh, Jacoby. But he's a rookie. Rookies are going to make rookie mistakes. They're not going to play perfectly. What you want to see from them is the production. You want to see the flashes, and he had both last night. 12 points on 10 shots, 3 rebounds, 0 turnovers, not many other stats, and 4 personal fouls. Another problem was that Jimmy Butler did his grifting routine and found the rookie and was like, okay, here's the rookie. I'm just going to draw a bunch of fouls on him, which he did. I mean, Jimmy Butler's a savvy veteran. That is what he's going to do. He knows that there is a veteran and rookie whistle, and he's going to come out on the winning end of that exchange most of the time. So he did that a couple of times, but I thought it was a positive game from Jacoby. Next up, Ochai Agbaji. I don't think he was that effective this game. He had 7 points on 8 shots, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block. I thought he played okay defense. Nothing to write home about. I mean, Jimmy Butler, as I've said, they don't have one guy matched up against another player the entire time on the court. They mix it up a little bit. They switch screens. They don't play entirely one-on-one defense. So you can't just look at one player and say like, oh, he had a good night, that means X player had a bad defensive night, because they do mix up the coverages a little bit. But I think he did have a good defensive night, although I don't think it was anything special. Off of the bench, we'll talk about Davion Mitchell. He got the chain, as I mentioned. He is working hard to stay in front of his man. He is working hard to fight through screens. One of his best attributes as a player is his ability to navigate screens and track players around screens. There was a statistic that showed that he is one of the best screen navigators in the league, and he does a very good job of that. And when that happens, when you're able to follow players around screens and stay attached to them, it's hard for teams to create the advantage, the separation that they need in order to bend the defense. Help defense is required when there's a breakdown, when one of the players on your team gets beat, or they run a pick and roll where usually there's just a natural advantage created there that you have to play in a certain way. And when he's on the floor, it's difficult for teams to create that kind of advantage. So his defensive effort is always a plus. On offense, I thought he brought just enough. I don't think he was fantastic on offense, but I think that he did bring just enough. He was 1 for 5 from 3, but the 3 that he made was a clutch 3 where they just needed a bucket. And then when he is being guarded, sometimes the other team has a habit of putting their worst defender to guard Davion Mitchell, which makes sense. He's not a great offensive player, but like guys like Duncan Robinson, who don't have the foot speed to stay in front of a player like Davion Mitchell. He can beat those players off of the dribble and create something for his teammates. So it's not like he's a complete zero on offense. And I think as I've said in the past, if he brings enough on offense, it's gravy because he's doing so much on defense. I thought he had a good game last night. I know single game plus minus, he had the highest on the team, plus 20. So that usually doesn't matter, but I'll mention it anyway. Another player had a great night, Jonathan Mobo. Only 3 points, but 7 rebounds, 6 assists. He only took 2 shots, but he was a force. The guy was playing with energy. There were a possession where he got 2 offensive rebounds in a row, where he just snatched the ball away from Kevin Love under the basket, just ripped it away from him, made him look like an old man. Sorry, Kevin. But he is a player. He's putting up these Draymond lines where low point totals, high in pretty much every other statistical category. I think that the Raptors made a pretty smart choice. I'm liking what I'm seeing from this guy. Any player taken in the second round, even if they're drafted 31st, like the first player taken in the second round, it's always a crapshoot. These guys are usually not long for the league. The track record for second round picks is not very good. But it looks like they found somebody. This guy looks like a contributor. Every time he steps on the floor, you see something from him where you're nodding your head. He knows how to play the game. He plays with a lot of energy. He does stuff where you can tell that the elevator goes to the top floor. Not going to mention any names, but there have been some bigs on this team in the past. Like, you watch them play and it's not pretty. You know that they don't quite understand the game at a high level. And that's not a problem with Jonathan. He's playing the correct way, and it shows up. You just watch him play. If you watch the games, you know that there's something there. Very happy with how he played last night. Chris Boucher, he was 0 for 4 from 3, but he had 8 points on 7 shots, 2 rebounds, 2 blocks. I thought he had a good game. The shot has been inconsistent this season. When it's going, he can have those huge games where he explodes and looks really, really, really good from a scoring perspective. But I thought that he had a good game last night. He had some of those blocks were really nice. He does make some mistakes on defense, and he does make some mistakes on offense. And some of the mistakes that he makes are taking bad shots. But as I've mentioned in the past, the role of the sixth man, the role of the player who comes off of the bench is to score. I'm going to let him shoot those shots because sometimes he pops off and it looks fantastic. He gives them a big lift. And even though he didn't have a shot going last night, I think he had a pretty good game. We'll just quickly mention Jamal Shed. Very poor game from him, in fact. He only played 4 minutes, had 2 points, but he made a bunch of really bad decisions in a very short time frame. He failed to cover the corner. He doubled one pass away for no reason, left the corner open, and they got an easy catch and shoot corner 3, which is the worst type of shot to give up after a layup. He turned the ball over. He just threw a very difficult pass. Maybe it was credited to Scotty, who got the turnover, but it was a very difficult pass. Scotty couldn't hang on to it, and then he turned the ball over again. So it was just a nightmarish. He was almost responsible for the run that the Miami Heat had in the second quarter, and then he just didn't touch the floor at all after that, which I think was the correct decision. Darko just benched him. He said, we can't deal with this right now. Jamal Shed is a rookie, so there's going to be nights like this, but I think he needs more time in the G League. I think he needs more conditioning there. He needs more positive reps for himself to build that confidence back up. But anyway, that was the game. I think that the Raptors played better than the Miami Heat all night long. The only exception to that was in the second quarter when they made a whole bunch of boneheaded mistakes, tons of turnovers in the second quarter. It was all self-inflicted. That was the thing. I don't think that Miami was playing particularly well in the second quarter. I think that the Raptors were playing sloppy basketball and let the Heat back into it. At the end of the game, when the Heat made a run to catch back up, I don't think that the Raptors were playing terribly. The Heat just got hot from 3 and were just hitting tons of difficult shots. And the Heat are a good team. They play the right way. They play a smart system. But I don't think that the talent is there for them. It seems like they need one more guy. And you can tell that's why they've been trying to bring in Dame and that other star that can really just push them over the hump. Tyler Hero is obviously playing well. Bam Adebayo is having a down year. He's not having a great season. And Jimmy Butler is still a good player, but they're not where they want to be. And I think that the Toronto Raptors just made their life miserable last night. They're playing really tough defense, and then RJ Barrett was a force going to the basket. They really did not have an answer for him. Their top 3 players made the right play almost every time, and they did the right thing, and they carried the Raptors to victory. And I think that you're going to start seeing that on this home stretch, is that their core of Jakob Poeltl, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett are going to help them get wins. Those 3 guys are going to win them games like they did last night. So very interesting time the Toronto Raptors are at right now. And next up, they play the Indiana Pacers. The Toronto Raptors have already beaten the Indiana Pacers this season. They beat them at home. They're playing them again at home. It'll be the second game of the homestand. I think that they can win that game. The Pacers are not playing very well. They've dropped their past 2 games. They are 9-12 on the season. The Raptors have beaten them already. Tyrese Halliburton has an even more advanced case of home and away itis than RJ Barrett. 22 points, 9 assists at home on 64% true shooting percentage, and then 12 points on the road on 43% true shooting percentage. That is disgusting. So even much worse than RJ Barrett, who had those nice 2 final road games there to really lift the Raptors. But yeah, Halliburton has been horrible on the road. So I think that the Toronto Raptors, I think they're probably favored to win that game. I kind of feel bad for Pascal Siakam because he has played well for them. Siakam's averaging 20 points on 54% from the field. He's shooting 40% from 3 on 4 attempts a game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. The guy is a good player. We saw it last year in the playoffs. We saw it we've been watching him his whole career. Good player. And then to be traded from the Raptors to go to the Pacers and then have the guy who is supposed to be, the number 1, and he's the great Robin, the excellent Robin, to Tyrese Halliburton's Batman. It just, what is happening here? Why is Halliburton so inconsistent, just not bringing it on the road? I just don't get it. Feel bad for Pascal Siakam, although maybe I shouldn't. He signed like a gargantuan contract this past offseason. So I love Pascal Siakam, and I wish him the best, but maybe not tomorrow night when the Pacers play the Raptors at 7:30. So I'm excited to watch that game, and that is the video. Okay, so this is going to be pretty divisive. I have seen many comments on both sides of the equation, so you got to let me know where you fall, because this is the crossroads for the Toronto Raptors. Should they tank, trade away the veterans, be bad, get one of those top picks for like Ace Bailey, who has looked fantastic, Dylan Harper, who has looked really good, Cooper Flagg, who has, hasn't been as good as he's been billed, but is still, when you watch him play, like, this guy has superstar potential? Or do you keep the veterans, especially a guy like Jakob Poeltl, who has been one of, if not the best player for the Raptors this season? Let me know in the comments. I really want to get a pulse for where most Raptors fans are. I want to know what you think. Should they push for the play-in? Should they bottom out? Let me know here in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. Always love talking to Raptors fans. We're the best. We really are. And leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Helps the channel grow. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.